the nasty little secret of American democracy, and we're not supposed to talk about this, is that not all the ballots get counted.
The poll workers watched 100 and some people go in specifically to that booth and vote. At the end of the day, when that tape came out, one person had voted, according to the machine.
People, they should be talking about this, not from the standpoint of you're liberal and you're conservative and, you know, which side of the fence are you on? The issue is, if it was tainted once, it could be tainted again.
It is critical that all qualified voters are able to vote and that all votes are counted as cast. There's growing evidence that eligible citizens are being denied the right to vote, and that votes, when cast, may be lost or miscounted or even deleted. Until recently, most Americans have assumed that our elections are basically honest. But with each election, more and more people are reporting incidents of voter suppression and irregular tallies. At first, machine problems were dismissed as glitches, and difficulties faced by voters were simply the result of poor planning and poll worker error. But as anomalies continued to be uncovered, people began to realize that voting problems, which had seemed in the past to affect only a few states, could be happening nationwide. American elections have never been administered by saints and angels. All parties historically have stuffed ballot boxes, suppressed votes. Look at the history of the voting rights movement in the South. As recently as the 1960s, people died to get access to the ballot. American elections have been two-fisted political brawls.
When Kennedy beat Nixon in 1960, there was a lot of talk that in Chicago the ballots had been rigged. There's never been any question but that when an election is at hand, a true believer will do what he or she thinks is necessary.
How do we know if an election is fair? One way is to recount paper ballots by hand, or at least audit a given percentage of them. Another way is to use polls and compare the results with the final tallies. In pre-election polls, people are asked how they intend to vote, and in exit polls, how they just voted. The largest gap ever reported in a U.S. presidential election between exit polls based on first-person reports and the official vote tally was in 2004.
2004 election was very problemematic. And it wasn't just in one state or one city or one location. It was a national phenomenon. In state after state, exit polls showed totally different outcome than vote counts. It's such an enormous disparity between exit polls, which have always been reliable, and vote count. And instead of coming up with some, real hard look at this, they just assumed that the exit polls were discredited. But why not the vote count?
This is an issue that shouldn't be partisan. This is a people's issue. This is not Republican or Democrat. Everybody at least says they want fair elections.
There is no reason, absolutely no reason, why people should have to wait 3 hours, 4 hours, 2 hours, whatever they had to wait, when I waited 5 minutes in my own precinct to vote. It was outrageous.
In some of the African-American communities, there were lines that were 11 hours long. On average, black people had to wait 3.5 hours to vote, whereas white suburban residents had to wait less than 18 minutes.
We had one precinct where there were 3 machines. One of them never worked. And this was from 9 o'clock in the morning. We made calls to the Board of Elections all day. And I was on the phone with the Board of Elections screaming at that point, we need another machine, we need something. Because at that point, other polling places were closed. There was no reason they couldn't bring in another machine.
We got a lot of calls from voters upset because, you know, again, 2 precincts, why does this one have more machines than I do? Well, it was based on registration and some of those other estimates that we used. And the bottom line was there were not enough voting machines.
People cannot wait for a day to vote. Our role is to provide access to the right to vote. We are the gatekeepers of democracy. And if we do not provide enough equipment for the voters to access this process, then in fact we are suppressing their votes.
Thousands of voters reported machine malfunctions in 42 states. Machine problems included touchscreens going blank, votes switching from one candidate to another, machine breakdowns, and inaccurate totals. In Georgia, some computer screens froze, causing delays as technicians tried to fix them. The technology that promised to make voting faster and more accurate was turning out to be unreliable. When Senator Bob Hagan saw his vote switch from John Kerry to George Bush, he tried to report what had happened to Democratic headquarters.
I touched John Kerry, and as I touched it, it immediately went to Bush. I called the Kerry campaign, and I said, I really think that this is a serious problem. We need to talk about this. You know, we should get it out. The press would be interested in this. But the Kerry campaign said, leave it alone. Don't talk about it. It's not something we want to get out.
Vote switching not only overwhelmingly occurred in multiple jurisdictions, but also occurred on equipment programmed by different vendors. Something that favors one candidate that occurs all over the country and spans across equipment from multiple vendors is no simple accident.